Alright, in this video I'm just going to give you a pretty basic rundown of duct sizing for your home. So the next thing, basically after you've sized it, you'll have a quote come back to you, and if somebody has provided you with a duct plan, you'll be able to sort of look at their duct plan and reference this video a little bit, maybe just to double check that you have actually got the correct size of ducting and stuff in place. If you do have an installer and they don't have a duct plan, it's a bit of a red flag to me. Basically, when we're doing this sort of stuff, I would have to draw this duct plan out. I would then go, I need X amount of these size vents, I need a certain amount of this ducting, this size ducting, these zone motors. I would use all that information to determine what the price is of your system anyway, because no two houses are the same. I don't do blanket prices, and you can't quote a job if you don't know what's actually going in the job. So I have seen a couple of scenarios where people have had systems installed in their house and the installers have turned up on the day and drawn a duct plan, and as it turns out in the end, that house doesn't work properly, all the vents are the wrong size, the unit's too big. It's a recipe for disaster. So this has to be done. Sometimes even you might send this back to customers and the customer might change their mind and decide, oh, I want to put something in the garage now, and then you have to modify this duct plan anyway. So you can't do much if you haven't done this to start with. So if you've got a quote back from someone and they've sent you back a plan, some of this you can reference if they've added this in. If they haven't sent you one, ask them if they can send you one, because again, it's the next important thing after you've sized it all and you've already worked out now what size system you need from the previous video. You need to make sure that the ducting goes with it so that it actually works properly. So to start this, we're going to basically go to outlet sizes, or outlet locations, sorry. Whenever I personally do plans, I will just put these vents sort of in the furthest distance away from the door, and the reason I just do that is because it sort of allows for the maximum duct length or run that I'm going to use for that particular area. But generally, you don't want to put an outlet here. When the air comes out of any of these vents, it's always going to try to find its path back to this return air. The return air just means return. It's where the aircon sucks its air in from. It then goes through the air conditioning unit. It is then blown out of the ducting to the other rooms. So if we go and put this vent near a doorway like this, the air is going to fall out of this vent. It's going to want to go straight out that door. You end up with a whole area over here somewhere where the room's stagnant, or it's not getting conditioned. So they should always be sort of in this sort of an area within reason. Aesthetics is the next thing that comes into it. You know, you might have trusses in your roof, and if you put the vent in the center of the room, it won't, because there's a truss there. Then you would have to have it over here. Then when you stand in front of that room, you're going to see this nice window, and the vent's not going to be centered to it. That's one thing. The next thing is you might have a bed here. You don't really want to have a vent blowing straight down on your bed while you're laying in there. You'll get very cold air or very hot air if it's on heating, blasting straight down on you. That's another thing to keep in mind. And sometimes it works out better just putting it somewhere around here. If you've got a ceiling fan in the center of the room, that ceiling fan can grab that air and throw it around in the room. So don't be too stressed if your installer hasn't put these where you're hoping they should be. As I said, I never do or ever would. But I always make sure that when someone does come to install it on the day, or it's explained to people, that when people do turn up to actually install it, the installers themselves will run around with you and they will check that you're happy with the vent to be here. Is it okay if we put it here? This is why we need to put it here. And if somebody does come to them and say, look, we'd like the outlet there, they should be confident enough to turn around to you and say, look, we can't put it there. It's not going to work properly for whatever reasons, what I just explained. If they want to fight you over it, write it down, because when it has problems because it doesn't work properly one day, it's up to them then. Usually if you're taking out ducted gas systems, they are generally located in the correct places. Systems that have an evaporative air conditioning system in them, they are located in the door for the opposite reason. The reason they have them here is because for an evaporative system to work, they pressurize the home. You then crack open your window, the air moves from here to that window and out. So it moves in the opposite direction. It always moves from the house out the windows. So keep that in mind. They should be using ducted gas outlets, but the ducted gas outlet sizes are usually too small. Big areas like this, you can have as many outlets as you want as long as they flow enough air to what's needed. You might be able to put two big 300s in here if you don't like the look of these three, or you know, you might have a big table here somewhere, you might have your lounge room laid out in a certain way where you prefer to have these outlets here. It doesn't really matter how many or how little you want as long as they can flow correct amount of air. Something like an ensuite, again, have to make sure you put the right size in. I prefer, if somebody's going to all this expense of doing all of this and putting everything in here, I'd rather just zone it and put a sensor in here. If you're using an Airtouch 5 or a Maya or an iZone or something, by the time you spend all this money, you may as well just put a sensor in it and just let these work together. It's just silly not to with all that money that's spent. So vent sizing. Your vent size is determined by this value that we've taken from here. If I go back to these zone labels, you can see we've got our value here of 115 litres a second. This room here we've got our value of 110. So what you would do is you'd reference a chart like this, which these are around online. It will show you that a certain duct size, so something like 150 mil, 200 mil, 250, it'll show you the maximum recommended air quantity for that particular outlet. It might be able to flow a little bit more, but if you stay around this as a rule of thumb, it'll be fine and you'll have no issues. But you always want to jump up. If this was, say, 100 litres a second in one of those rooms, you would still jump up to the 250. Never go lower than what it's stated, because you won't get enough air in there to do that room properly. And you might find that when you have a room like this that cops the full afternoon sun, it will need this larger size. So basically what you do is you go 115 litres a second. We would have a look at this chart. 92 is not big enough, 170 is fine. So you put a 250 outlet in there. That would have a 250, you go to the next room, that's larger than 92, put a 250 in there. This room here, it's larger than 92, it's less than 170, it gets a 250. This room here gets a 250, this room gets a 250. This is under 170, it gets a 250. This room's only 43. If we have a look at the chart, what does 43? You've got a 150 mil. It would be fine in that little ensuite. You put a 150 in there. When it comes to this big open area, it's 428 litres a second of air. So you can either, then once you've decided what how many outlets you want to put in there, let's just say we only wanted to put 2 in there, we would just go 428 divided by 2 equals 214. If we have a look at this chart, we would have to put 2 300 mil ones in there, which you'll notice on the other video is what I had in there before. If you wanted to go 3 of them in there, you'd go 428 divided by 3 equals 142. So we would have to put 3 of those 250 mil ones in there. If you wanted to put 4 outlets in there, again you go 428 divided by 4 is 107. So you would still be putting 4 of these vents here. These vents anyway are going to be limited by what this can do. So this duct here itself can only do, which is a 400, can do 500 litres a second of air, which is going to feed these 3. So even though we've got these 3 here, if we added up those 3 ducts on their own, because they're 170 each, they could do 510 litres a second of air. because we're only putting a 400 duct in, we've limited those ducts now. No matter what, because we're pushing this in, we've only got these 3 ducts. So if we went to put in something that's like a, let's just say we put a 450mm duct onto it, it's 636. Divide that by 3 is 212. Because they're connected to 250 ducts, the max they can do is 170 each anyway. There wasn't any point in putting the bigger duct in there. So that's all sort of personal preference. Once you've laid those out, then you start adding your zones and things into them. And then you start working out the next part, which is these little sections here that come away from those. So again, you need to be feeding this with the right size duct. So if you add those 2 rooms together, because they were going to run at the same time, it's 116 plus 102 equals 218. We need a 300mm duct to supply this box to ensure that these rooms get the required amount of air. If we put a 250mm duct in here to feed these rooms are going to be sufficient of air because this 250 doesn't supply enough air to these. This would be the same. You would work that out with that. 161 plus 43 is 200. We go back here, 200. 250 is not enough. We have to jump up a size. So we go to 300. So you can see as we're going back away from the vent itself, our duct size is increasing because we need more volume of air to be able to be distributed across these. So now that we've got 2 300s here, the total potential of these 4 rooms combined would be 161 plus 43 plus 116 plus 102 is 422 litres a second of air. If we go back to the chart again, a 350 only does 385, so then we have to jump up to a 400. That's why that 400mm duct is there. So now you can see why we've got this here, why we've got this here. These rooms over here are the same. If we add these up, we've got 110 plus 115 plus 145 is 370. And if we go to the chart here again, 370, a 350 does 385, so we're fine with that. We would put a 350mm duct in there. You can sometimes, depending on how you intend on using it, you might treat this as it's only ever going to be on during the day and not at night, and you're only going to ever have these 2 on at night. You would be able to shrink this duct down one size to a 300. It would do these 2 rooms fine. It would do this room fine when it's on its own, but if you're ever in the scenario where you happen to want to run those 3, it's not enough. So you may as well just put in the right size to start with. These then go back. I've put a bypass in this, which I've got other videos about, but I've just drawn it in there for the sake of it before, which then steps up to a 400. The only real reason the 400's there is because you can buy these boxes in any configuration you like. You can get standardized ones where they're 3x400mm ducts coming off the front. So that's why those ducts will step back like that. When you start looking at these duct sizings here around this unit, you'll notice that some of these units, and I'm just looking at this as an example, but it's an HAA series Mitsubishi Electric. They come with these inbuilt adapters on the back of them now, and some of the Daikin still as well, and they tell you what size they want to see put on the back of that unit, because there's plenty of people that are cowboys and they don't put the right sizes on. If we have a look at this, it tells you here required return air duct 2x400, 2x400, 2x400. The reason that's there, 2x400s would be 1006 litres a second of air. If we have a look at their specifications, they're up around 1000 litres a second of air on high. So when you connect this up to this unit, each of these ducts can do 500 litres a second of air. When this unit now can blow 1000 litres a second of air because it can suck it in, we can have this on, and this will easily flow 500. we could have this on at the same time, and it would easily flow this. So we'd be able to get 1,000 litres a second of air out of that unit, which would be enough to do all this area. Fine. If I wanted to run this area at night, I can send 500 down here. I could send 500 down here, whether I need it or not. Any sort of which way I run this now, I can send the air wherever it needs. And I won't have an issue. You will see some people that start putting the wrong size ducts on here, and they might put 2 of this size on here. Then all of a sudden you've got a unit that can only do 2 of those. If you have a look, 385. The maximum that unit can do is about 770 litres a second of air because of the ducts. The unit can do 1,000. You've limited it because somebody's put the wrong size ducts on it, and it will never flow enough air throughout the house. So it's important to double check these when you get a plan back from someone. Have a bit of a look at this sort of stuff and sort of work out for yourself. Even if you wrote it down, you just add on here whatever the sizes are for each, how much air they can move, and you can double check they've done it right. Because there could be a chance where someone's going to put 200 in here because they've got a rule of thumb to themselves that any bedrooms have a 200, and you'll find that all of a sudden that room's short of air, and it's probably one that struggles on a real hot day or something. So you can't take guesses. All the stuff is here provided so that people can put the right size stuff in. When people put the units in, ideally you want the unit in the center of the house. The reason that's done is when the air comes out of this, it's always going to want to take the closest path first. So even if I turn this on and started running this with the living in these areas on, a big chunk of the air is going to want to go to here first because it's a shorter path. It will then go to here and start spreading out. But usually I try to keep everything sort of even. So as you can see how this is, we're keeping to that sort of 6 meter length to here. We're keeping these 2 lengths here as close as we can to being even. We're keeping these ducts here as close as we can to being the same length back to that. It's keeping it all kind of as even as possible. And the distance that's going to that vent then is sort of similar to what it's going to this vent. So it's important to keep this close to the center of your whole system. If somebody starts trying to put it down here because it's easier, it will create issues where all the air wants to shoot to these easier ones first, and these ones way over here struggle to get any air unless you turn everything else off. Then you get people starting to play with these air cons and starting to bump the fan up in them so that they've got more power so that they can push further, and you're just starting to correct problems that arose from the installation to begin with. Your return air is something you have to have. It's usually a decent size, so if you look at this system, it's got one that's 900 by 500 millimeters in size. This also is something important to put in the right place. There is no way you want to walk in your front door and see this grill sitting here somewhere, unless you really have to. You definitely don't want to see one sitting here in the center of your home or off the side of your living area. If you're not careful, some people are lazy. They don't want to put roof sheets, take roof sheets off. They want to do everything where it's easiest in the biggest part of the house. They just want to cut a hole here, shove the unit up, stick it in there, put a grill in, go home. They don't have to walk in here every night and look at this and go, why have I got this grill here? It looks horrible. So where possible, we always try to stick this out of the way. Sometimes your roof trusses don't permit that you can get one this big in here, central. But if you have a look, you can buy all these different size ones. So, and there's heaps of different sizes. So whenever you can't fit that in there, you can easily get 2 of something like this. And you can put one either side of the truss. And that just gives you a bit more options. You can still buy the same adapters to connect each duct to with no problem. So that's another thing to check. If people are lazy, they'll try cut corners. They don't want to get 2 grills. They only want to cut one hole. All sorts of other things. It's your house, so you need to make sure you're happy with the way it all looks afterwards. And they're not going to tell you all the time that you can get different options for it. So That stuff's very important to lay out. Some of these, as I've mentioned, when you're using a 250mm duct, it does flow 170 litres a second of air. You can get, you will get too much air going into this room now, more than you need, which it's nothing you can do about because there is these jumps between duct sizes which are substantial sometimes. If you have something like the Airtouch 5 control, you can go back into that controller and you can go to a balancing tab that's in there, and that lets you set a limit of how far these zone motors can open. So if you wanted to, you could go and afterwards set this to a limit of 70%, which will reduce how much air this ever puts out. You can do that to a few of these and play around with that a little bit and get that a little bit closer to that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it'll just stop it being noisy, blowing a gale, pushing more air in there than you ever did need. If you're not careful and you do have too much air going into rooms, what can happen is you will start getting doors trying to slam shut. You'll hear windows creaking and the unit not working well sometimes. That's because these are sucking air in here. They're pushing it into a room. When that's perfectly sealed, it's pressurizing that room, and the air is trying to get out because it's under pressure. So when you have the doors shut, you should be able to feel air coming back out under the bottom of the door. You have to be very careful that you don't have carpet put in very thick. And then if you have a look, your door gap should be sort of 10 to 15 mil at least under the door so that the air can move back through that room and out. Otherwise you will have problems. You'll either get windows creaking, doors slamming shut, whistling sounds, all sorts of other things because you're overpressurizing the room. Some things can be critical to having light coming in them or not having noise come out, something like a media room sometimes. So what you can do for something like a media room is you could have a little vent like this here. I'm just going to draw this in so you can see it. You would have two of these, one here, one here. And that's connected by a bit of duct. What this is called a transfer duct. So what this allows to happen is when the door is shut in this media room now, and it might have nice seals on it to keep it very sound tight, airtight. This air will come in here, pressurize this room. It will push the air up through this grill in the roof, through a piece of duct out here. If you were standing out here when this aircon was running, you would feel air blasting out of this vent onto you. And it's all the air that's getting pushed into the room, leaving the room, but it's letting you maintain a room that's perfectly airtight, sound tight, so that it's quieter. But you don't generally do it in many situations. It's only going to be something like a media room, because these can start looking ugly when you've got these across every room here. And you wouldn't want to try to link all these back to this return because it's a nightmare running all this ducting everywhere. You've got ducts crossing over other ducts like this, and it just turns your roof into a big mess just for something when you could have just had enough of a door gap for it to start with. That basically is kind of a real simple little rundown of what to check for. So if you get a plan back, this should sort of make you realise that you do need to check this and you do need to make sure it's right. And all it would take for you to do is to get a duct plan like this back from someone with all this data and go, oh, it's 115, let me just double check. Yep, it's that size, that's that size, that's that size. Use a calculator, you can add it all up and make sure that it's all good. And you don't want to have too big either. Too big's as bad as having too little. So, and I saw something the other day that someone had 150mm outlets everywhere in their house. Basically something like this room here. And all it would have taken is for them to go, I've got a 150mm outlet in here, let's have a look. 44 litres a second of air. Hang on a minute. 161 and 44. that vent's only 25% of what that room needs. It's never going to cool it down. And they could have gone back to the installer then and said, hey, why are you putting this in? It turns out the whole home had 150 mil outlets in it with a 20 kilowatt air conditioning system. And the air conditioning system blew out basically 1,300 litres a second of air. But if we added up the total of their 7 outlets, that only did 44. The whole home could only receive 300. So they had a unit that was way too big with vents that were way too small with a house that wouldn't work properly. And all it would have taken at the time was just somebody to have a look at this, and the owner shouldn't have had to because they're trusting that someone knows what they're doing. But in every trade there's good people and there's bad people, so if I can myself, for any job I ever get done, I try just do a little bit of research on it just in case, you know, someone's lying to me or whatever. It's worth knowing a little bit about something that's worth so much money. So that poor person now has to get all the ducting ripped out. They've got a unit in their house that's too big that, you know, they're not going to pay for that again. Somebody needs to go back there and adjust these sizes, then adjust the sizes of these, then adjust the sizes of these, just so that the aircon can work properly again. And as I said, all it was the sake of somebody going around and just double checking that this matches this or is in with spec of this. So that's pretty close to a very simple rundown. That should help you out. And again, all this is for is just to make sure that you're not getting ripped off by someone. And if you're not sure, as I've mentioned before, we can do all this for you. This is a bit more of a simpler place. Some houses can get very complex with how they run. You don't want ducts going over the top of each other. You want to try to think about it as much as you can to make it work as best as it can. But you can send us your plan. We can work all this out for you, give you a plan like this, give you these details. And as you can see from this too, there are so many different ducts and things here. You could give this plan to 15 different people, and 15 different people will have 15 different ways of doing this. And some might run this duct over here with this, and then run a duct around here to these, and all sorts of things. So when you get a comparative quote back, you might not be aware, but you've got 15 different versions of this plan running 15 different duct styles with different layouts with everything else, and it's going to confuse you because you don't really know what's right unless you understand what you're looking at with this data and these vent sizes and this. All you have to type in Google is flexible duct calculator and you'll see something come up like this, and then you can go through for yourself. But if we did a plan for you, you would get the one plan back like this. You can send the one plan off to 15 different people and say, can you please quote me on an install to suit this? And you should get back 15 comparative quotes because you've specified the duct design that you want it done in. So it helps you immensely make sure that you're getting the best deal you can get while getting something that's done properly. So hope this helps. I'll think of something else to add to this, but this is definitely the second most important thing to check along with your capacity of your home, and it'll get you cranking towards having something that works awesome. Thank you.